Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, welcome you back to the lockdown lecture series of the Nehru Science Center, Mumbai. Uh, we're extremely happy to welcome today our distinguished speaker, Colonel Pradeep Bhatt, about whom I'll be introducing a bit later. Today's talk is going to be on cyber security. We are in a pandemic situation, and we've already crossed about 700,000 COVID cases in India, but we're doing fairly well. Um, the only issue is that most of the science centers are closed, your schools are closed, but then you continue to remain connected through your smartphones, electronic systems. Each one of them are enabling you to be connected. And so is the case with the electronic system. The intelligent systems are also helping our COVID warriors in tracing, reaching out to the people to send out messages, keep us informed. Uh, but then, like the human system, the immune system that we have, which has currently been affected by the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, the disease of which is called as COVID. In a similar system, the intelligent systems or the computers or the smartphones and things like that can also get infected. That's why the way the body immune system helps us in maintaining our body system healthy, in a similar manner, the electronic system, the intelligent systems also need to be healthy. They too can be affected by viruses and other security systems which breach the security layers. The way we have layers of immune system, similarly, there are layers of security systems embedded in the intelligent electronic systems. But then, what happens if these intelligent the security systems are breached? That's where the cyber security becomes a major issue. So we have with us Colonel Pradeep Bhatt, who is an alumnus of the prestigious National Defense Academy, Khadakwasla. Not just an alumnus, he is in fact the president medal winner of the National Defense Academy. He is the president gold medal winner of the Indian Military Academy, the Sword of Honor he has received. He has served for 26 years in the Indian Army in the Corps Signals. He joined way back in 1981. Subsequent to his 26 years of service, during which he has worked on information and communication technologies, systems, networks, software development, all these things for the Indian security. He subsequently joined the IBM and worked there for about 11 years. He's worked on multi-domain teams to design IT and information security solutions for the defense and government. Now, in the year 2018, he has joined the prestigious National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, a government agency. Pradeep Bhatt, he's completed his BTech from the prestigious Indian Institute of Science and also has completed his ME from the same prestigious Indian Institute of Science. Incidentally, he is also an alumnus of the Sainik School, Bijapur. I too have an honor to being the same alumni and also the classmate of Pradeep Bhatt. We're extremely happy, Pradeep Bhatt, that you accepted our invitation. I hand over the stage to you to speak to our audience on understanding the cybersecurity. Thank you, Pradeep.
Thank you, Shiv Prasad. It's an honor and privilege for me to give this talk on understanding cybersecurity under the aegis of the Nehru Science Center, Mumbai. Since my childhood, I've been enamored by science and technology. It's my good fortune that I was able to work in this field both during my stint in the army and after leaving the army too. We all enjoy the connectivity and productivity that our PCs and mobiles have given us. Having conversations with friends and family, sharing photos and videos, online shopping, electronic cash transfers, and so on. Information and communication technologies have empowered us in all these activities in our daily lives. However, there's a dark side to these technologies which we see in the form of cyber frauds, cyber harassment, cyber crimes, and cyber attacks. These are things that can hurt us very badly. We all hear and know of cases where people have lost their money to fraud, women and children have been stalked or harassed online, businesses have collapsed due to cyber crimes, and national critical infrastructure like telecom, financial, and power grids have been brought down by large-scale cyber attacks. Many organizations across the globe have been hit by ransomware, which locked up all their IT systems and data. A number of these organizations paid huge amounts of ransom to the criminal groups just to get back access to their own data. Not only that, they also had a huge reputational loss because of these attacks. Notwithstanding the seriousness of cyber threats, the subject of cybersecurity should not create a sense of fear and awe in us. Like physical security, cybersecurity too is based on simple principles and practices which we can all easily understand and imbibe them in our daily lives. There is a famous military quote: "The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war," which aptly conveys the importance of being ready. While this was said in the context of military campaigns, I think it is equally applicable to our preparation for war against cybercrime and cyber attacks. During this talk, I will help you understand the dark side of cyberspace and guide you on how to analyze the consequences of our actions and take protective measures to protect ourselves, our families, communities, and workplaces. So, strap on your seatbelts and get ready to take an exciting ride to understand the basics of cybersecurity. Next. I've structured this talk into 4 subtopics as given on the slide. How things work, what is valuable, who are the threats, and how do we protect. Each of these subtopics will give you a basic wireframe into which you can plug in all the information that you will receive from various other sources throughout your lives. Next. Let us now look at the various components of smart devices and systems so that we can understand how they can be affected by cybersecurity breaches. Next. Cybersecurity has become a vital subject because of the exponential growth of smart devices and machines. In 2019 alone, there were over 55 crore or 550 million internet subscribers in India who access the internet using smart devices. So, what are smart devices and what do they do? Smart devices are programmable in that they can be programmed by humans to carry out different functions. They work on various types of data: binary, text, pictures, audio, and video. Next. Basically, smart devices collect, process, store, display, receive, and transmit data. There are many types of smart machines. Devices like desktops, laptops, tablets, mobiles, and servers are easily recognizable as smart. However, there are other appliances like home routers, TVs, ATMs, and information kiosks, which are also programmable and smart. Next. Let's now look at the various components of a smart system. We start with the engine, the processor, the core hardware component of a smart device that runs the programs or applications. The Intel brand of processors are the most common in desktops and laptops, while ARM is widely used in tablets and mobile devices. Next is the manager, the operating system, which is a software program that controls and manages everything in the smart system. Appliances like washing machines and microwaves do have program controllers to manage wash cycles or baking times. In a generic sense, our parents too are like the operating machines of our homes. The most common operating systems today are Windows, Linux, Android, and iOS. Smart systems have various other hardware components like input and output devices, which includes keyboard, mouse, next, camera, microphone, display, printers, speakers, etc. Network connectors, storage devices, and sensors. The primary differentiator of smart systems is the plethora of software applications like WhatsApp, MS Office, and many others. Applications are programs written by software developers, and when they run, they provide instructions to the processing engine to receive, transmit, process, and store data. Applications are installed by the owners of smart devices and systems based on what they want to do with their smart devices. Each of the above hardware and software components must be specifically configured for use. For example, you do this on smart TVs to configure the channels. The configuration data resides in the storage in the form of data files. Next. All appliances like the home routers too have their own embedded operating systems, programs, and configuration data. It's important to know about these components because one or more of these components are typically used for cyber crimes and cyber attacks. Now let's see how smart systems communicate with one another, which in computer lingo is called networking. As seen on the slides, we have several networking mechanisms: wired or cable LAN, wireless or Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, mobile networks, which are provided by different mobile service providers, which have different types: 2G, 3G, 4G, and now going to come 5G. From our homes and offices, we connect to the servers of our banks and central offices, as well as to the data centers of Google, Amazon, Facebook, and others through a network of routers. The routers in our homes with the broadband service providers and in the data centers. They are intelligent devices that are programmed to route data from different sources to different destinations. The data centers have a huge number of servers on which various applications run. For example, hundreds of Gmail servers run in the Google data center to receive, store, and transfer emails between different users. Again, it's important that we are aware about various networks because these are the routes that cyber attackers can take to reach our valuables. Next. Let us now look at our valuables and see how we can identify and classify them. The first step for protection of any valuables is to identify the valuables themselves. This is easy in the physical domain, where we all know that a gold chain or a purse containing money, debit cards, and house keys is valuable, but an empty purse is not. Recognizing the valuables in the digital domain is slightly more difficult because every valuable is ultimately a collection of zeros and ones, binary data that is stored as a file or transmitted as a stream. We can broadly categorize the digital valuables into 4 baskets. Information, these are in the form of documents, photos, audio, and video recordings. These digital valuables are typically held in our devices and also shared with others. Transactions, a good volume of our digital assets reside in the servers of our service providers, bank accounts, emails, and social media posts. We also hold all our day-to-day activities in the form of transactions in these central servers. Configuration data. This is the data that enables systems and applications to do our work in the way we want it to be done. For example, during a video call, we give permission to the video application to take control of our microphone and camera, but switch it off after the video call. Finally, passwords. These are the keys to our devices and applications, as well as to the lockers and containers in which our digital valuables are stored. An example of a digital locker is a bank, email, social media, and work accounts. Next. Once we identify our valuables, we also need to recognize as to who can legitimately access, read, modify, download, or delete these valuables. We explicitly or implicitly give these persons or organizations authority and permissions to access specific valuables. Broadly, there are 4 legitimate groups: yourself, no doubt about that. Your trusted people, these people are your well-wishers who are interested in your well-being and will cause no harm to you. Trusted organizations, these are your service providers who serve you and collect payment for the services, either in money or through monetization of your data. A good service provider will take care of your valuables as if they are your own. And finally, the government. The government typically has two roles. One, as a provider of IT services to its citizens through e-governance and Digital India programs, and another as a law enforcement and cybercrime investigation authority. Next. Let's now look at who are the threats and how do we identify and classify them. Threats to our digital assets are from persons or entities who seek access to these valuables with malevolent intent or malicious purposes. In generic terms, they are called threat actors. There are basically two kinds of threat actors. Those who steal or take something illegitimately. These actors want to gain in physical terms like money. And second, those who cause harm or make something bad happen. These are actors who look forward to gain in emotional terms like the power to destroy. The capabilities and intentions of threat actors are different for different classes of targeted victims. These are all shown on a table on the left side. You have the targeted victims could be individuals, families, groups, community, businesses, enterprises, government, or the national critical infrastructure. Threat actors range from thieves, bullies, stalkers, blackmailers, criminal and other groups, and anti-government groups. One should note that in many cases, employees and competitors in a business can be threat actors for the business and enterprises too. Next. We now come to the fourth and the last subtopic, namely, how do we protect ourselves? Next. A protection framework defines the basic actions that we should take to protect our valuables. This applies to every kind of protection, be it physical valuables or digital valuables. So here I would like to bring a comparison between what we do to protect our physical valuables and digital valuables to understand that the basic concepts are very similar. It's just that the mechanisms, that the way you do it is different. The key elements of any protection framework are three things: secure, observe, and act. Let us now look at each of these elements with respect to our digital valuables. Secure the valuables. We have seen earlier the steps that we take to identify the valuables. In the physical world, we secure our valuables using physical locks. In the cyberspace, we use three mechanisms to secure the valuables. The first is password or keys to protect the data which is lying in our storage. The second is secure channels using HTTPS for web browsing and online transactions, which protects the data when it's moving in motion. And third, patching and updating of operating systems and applications regularly. This is something like repairing and replacing broken latches of your windows and doors just to ensure that they don't become a point of vulnerability. The next action would be to secure the routes of access to these valuables. We have again earlier identified the access routes to valuables in terms of the computer networks. In the physical world, we secure access points with the help of security guards who control entry into our colony, office, or factory. In the cyberspace, similarly, the access routes are controlled by software utilities like antivirus, anti-malware, and firewalls. Next. The third dimension is to observe all activities. We continuously observe and record all security-related events. In the physical world, we do this with the help of CCTV cameras. In the cyberspace, we do this again with software utilities that automatically store all security events, like someone accessing a sensitive file or accessing a system. Finally, in the case of any unusual activities, we must act immediately to minimize the damage. In the physical world, one uses fires or security alarms for raising alerts. In the cyberspace, software utilities like the intrusion detection system inform us of any unusual activity via notifications, SMS, or email. Next. The protection continuum shows a set of independent and mutually supporting mechanisms that together provide protection, observation, and response to our IT systems. The first four elements. Next. These elements we have already discussed in the previous slide. Hence, let us now look at the last three elements. The first of them is the control rooms, which are called security operations centers. So these are control rooms spread across the globe that monitor and respond to all security events. These are typically used by large and medium businesses and enterprises to protect their IT systems and networks across the nation or the globe. Small businesses who sometimes cannot invest into captive SOCs typically depend on managed security service providers who can provide these services to manage the security of their IT systems and networks. At the national level, the Computer Emergency Response Team, CERT India, is a nodal agency to advise and respond to security events that happen across the nation, either at individual, business level, or at enterprises level, or the government level. Finally, no matter what, there will always be cyber crimes. Next. The Ministry of Home Affairs has recently launched the National Cyber Crime Reporting Portal, where one can report these cyber crime complaints online, so that a dedicated mechanism to resolve these crimes is possible. Next. Let us now look at some real-life situations and examples. Before we go to specific examples, let me give you a brief overview of how cyber crimes typically are carried out. It's important to understand these mechanisms well, because it's widely used in all kinds of cyber crimes and cyber attacks. Cyber crimes are typically carried out by threat actors by exploiting vulnerabilities. A vulnerability is a weakness which can be exploited by a threat actor to perform unauthorized actions. There are basically three kinds of weaknesses or vulnerabilities. Weaknesses in the IT systems. These typically include applications which have faults or bugs in them, or are improperly configured to give access when it should not be given. For example, in a mobile system or in a mobile device, you give permissions to an application to do certain things which it doesn't require to be done, opens up a vulnerability within that device for that application or anyone else to exploit. The next kind of vulnerabilities are in processes. So these include gaps in monitoring of security events. If you are not observing something and something happens, you don't know about that. It can also be in not resolving problems in security software utilities. For example, if a firewall is down for some reason and you have not looked at reactivating it and enabling it, it opens up a vulnerability in your system because the process of taking action to keep everything updated or working has been bypassed. Finally, vulnerabilities due to ignorance and carelessness of users. This is by far the most common but the most easily addressable issue. Almost all cyber crimes have two basic stages. The first stage, the preparation stage, is the one in which a threat actor identifies the vulnerabilities in the systems that can be exploited by him or her and prepares for the same. Second is the attack stage, in which the threat actor executes his plan of action. So in the first example, let's look at how carelessness or ignorance of not protecting sensitive passwords opens up towards attack. So in the first stage, like I mentioned, the threat actor, in this case, is a cyber thief, prepares. What does he do? He observes you enter the pattern or pin in your mobile to exploit the vulnerability of you not protecting it from being visible to others. And what does he do with that? He steals your password of your smartphone as well as of your digital wallet. The next stage, the attack stage, next, is where the cyber thief uses the pattern of pin that he observed you entering, and when your phone is lying unattended, accesses your smartphone to reach your digital wallet and transfer money to his account. So so let's come to next example. Again, one of carelessness or ignorance of clicking malicious links in fake messages. This is one of the most common methods of attack in today's world. Next. The first stage, the preparation stage, a threat actor, example, a stalker, he sends a fake link or spam message to you either by email or through a social media message, which when clicked installs malware into your system. You would have heard of a very common malware which has been coming up regarding the COVID-19. There are a number of malwares of these kinds which are trying to exploit the fear of COVID-19 and forcing people to go to links or download malware without their knowledge. So once the malware is installed in your system, it can take control of your keyboard, your video, your microphone, etc. And using something called key loggers, it can record all the keys, all the key entries which you have been making on your phone or your laptop, and send it to something called a command and control server, which collects all of them continuously. At the central level, the command and control server, the keys can be analyzed, and they would come to know that certain keys or certain key entries which you did so correct to a cloud account password that you are using. So now, by analyzing the key logging details, he is able to access or get access to your cloud account password. Then goes into the attack stage. Next. This is where the stalker uses the password which he has been able to get using malware to access your cloud account and then access your Facebook page or your email page, contacts, photos, and whatnot. And there he is now open to do whatever he wants to do with that, to either bully you, to blackmail you, to send fake messages to your friends and family which seem to be coming from you but are actually created by the stalker or the thief. This is one of the most common mechanisms which is going on in the world today and needs to be protected by the simple mechanism of seeing that you don't click on fake links or spam messages without being sure about them. Next. The final example is of carelessness in business, where the business management, the top management or the IT people do not monitor the security of the IT systems and networks comprehensively. Next. One of the common cases in businesses is a criminal or a malafide employee who tries to access the confidential or sensitive data of the organization. What does he do? He sends a malicious link, similar to what we saw in the earlier case, a malicious link, but on the internal network, which is considered to be secure. It could be sent by an email to the database administrator. You've seen a sample, for example, he says, okay, there is a refund which is required to be done. Please take on that. The database administrator, either due to ignorance or carelessness, when he clicks the link, it again installs a malware or pulls out the data from the administrative data of the database administrator who manages the database files, the confidential data of the organization. Next. Now, using this password which he has been able to steal from the database administrator, he is again able to access the database and do everything which the database administrator could do. He could take backups, read your confidential data, steal it, or even delete it. So malafide employees or criminals, both insiders or outsiders, can do this action. Next. We have seen how vulnerabilities can be exploited by threat actors to gain access to our digital valuables. Let me give you a few pointers to what I recommend and do to protect myself, my family, and my organization in the cyberspace. I'm sure it will trigger you all to take similar steps and learn more about it in your daily lives. The first of them is to invest into good software utilities. So one would look at, when I talk about utilities, I'm basically looking at antivirus, anti-malware, intrusion detection, and firewall capabilities. The next one is to ensure that the operating system and the key applications are always patched. They are generally possible to be configured nowadays to be automatically patched whenever there is a bug or fault found by the OEM of the application. He can always send it there and patch it automatically. That is the most recommended option. Third, never leave your laptop, tablet, mobile, or your home router open for access to others. Protect them with good passwords and screensavers. And typically, the screensaver should be such that there's an automatic locking of the screen after a minute or two. It may be difficult to use, but it certainly helps you that even if you leave your mobile device or tablet unattended for a very short time, it's unlikely that somebody can access that. The fourth is to download apps only from authentic sites like the Google Store, the Apple's iStore, etc. The next important one is to identify risks. In the physical world, we keep our gold and our important documents in lockers, while others are kept in open drawers. Similarly, the high-risk valuables of ours, like bank accounts, digital wallets, and office email, which can cause financial loss or reputational loss, should always be well protected. Online shopping and some social media accounts are medium risk in terms of financial loss or reputational loss, and they can be handled as such, while accounts from legitimate informational websites are low risk. The next action is to have very strong passwords. More importantly, have different passwords for high risk, medium risk, and low risk accounts. One should always change passwords immediately or regularly. The immediate change of passwords is something like what you do, that in case you lost your house keys, you straight away go and change the locks. Similarly, if you think that your password has got compromised, change it immediately. Use different passwords for high risk, medium risk, and low risk accounts, just like you use different locks for your lockers and your drawers. One should avoid using a single password for all accounts. This will be like a master key, which, if compromised in one location by somebody, can open all your accounts. You can use a good password creation mechanism or a password manager to manage your medium and low risk account passwords. The mechanism should be such that it should help you generate strong and unique passwords which are easy to remember but difficult to track, or difficult for someone else who doesn't know how the way it's been designed to understand what's the password. Finally, and most importantly, be aware and always look out for social engineering attempts by people around you. They could be in form of social media posts, they could be in form of emails, they could be in form of calls, chats, etc. Each of these attempts could be from a malicious actor or a threat actor who's trying to gain access to your valuables. Next. Finally, I hope you all enjoyed this exciting journey of understanding cybersecurity. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions which I now hand over back to the director to moderate and take on. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. It was a fascinating lecture. And from the comments that I could see on the Facebook, it's very lucid and very simple language. That's what the people are telling. But yet, a couple of questions. The first question I would like to take is from our major stakeholder, who is the teacher. She is Surabhi Gunar. Most of the classes are now online. She's asking, how can we protect our data and computer from getting hacked? As being teachers, we share our screen and teach to our students.
Yeah, I think teachers are very open to, or very prone to attacks by people. We have heard of cases about 2-3 months back when Zoom bombing was something which was very prominently given out. So we go back to the fundamentals. What you need to protect is your systems and the application in which you're using. So let's take the systems. So your data which is lying on your laptop or the computers, ensure that you have your patches, latest updates done, so that any vulnerabilities which can be exploited by people are avoided. When you do online teaching, you typically have to ensure that only the people who you have authorized to come in can do so, and no one else can come in. So it's done by configuring your video chats or video conferences with secure passwords, and seeing that it's only shared not through the same mechanism like social media, but through a separate mechanism, maybe through confidential emails or maybe on WhatsApp channels. So it means that the only people who have access to those channels can get data about what password is being used to access your social media. I think there are a lot of lectures and mechanisms today available on the social media sites which educate us on that. I would recommend that many of the people who participate in a number of video conferences or work from home to attend a few of them and learn the nuances, because when you listen multiple people talking different things, you tend to absorb it much better than just through one lecture.
Okay, there is another, I think maybe a teacher, Lata Nikita. She's asking, you talked about a particular government website. I think she's meaning CERT. What is it, and how do we go about complaining or giving information?
Yeah, it's called cybercrime.gov.in. You can always search it, just search for cybercrime Ministry of Home Affairs. It will pop up immediately. It's a government site which was inaugurated in the month of January. What was happening was that cyber crimes today really don't have any jurisdiction, and the conventional process of going and lodging an FIR in the local police is a huge problem, because what happens is that the local police really do not know how to handle it because of the lack of experience or lack of technological savviness. So this site today is something which is going to be merged or already connected with your helpline 112 number. I'm not sure if it's done or not, but that was in the plan. It is a one-stop portal for anybody from anywhere in the country to record a complaint against any crime, and then it gets given to the respective jurisdiction for further action. So it's easy for anyone to report crime today. So you can always look at it, look at how it's been done. It's extremely powerful and very well targeted or tuned for women and children.
There are other questions also. There is Bharti Anand. Very interesting question. Is data privacy a myth? How do we protect data?
I'm really not the right person to answer it because it's got a lot of legal domain. But let's look at it from a technology perspective. Today, data privacy, yeah, it's much less than what it was maybe 20 or 30 years back. Any small thing today, even if you don't know it, is being available as record. Maybe you're sitting and watching a movie or a play, and somebody sitting behind you can just record you in his mobile device and post it whenever he wants to. So data privacy in that sense is very difficult today. Notwithstanding that, we should always go back to the point as to what do you want to protect. Many of us always good. I mean, no one minds coming on TV somewhere to be seen there. But however, we would like to certainly protect our valuables like our accounts, our confidential photographs, some things which we may be embarrassed about and all that. So as long as you know what's to be protected, there are mechanisms to protect that, and you can make those things private. But certainly, yeah, you have to go through a lot of it. Be very clear as to what you want to protect, and rest of it, yeah, it may happen, but you don't do that. The government is coming up with protection laws. Let's see. I think they will do a lot of good, but a lot of it also depends on how the investigation and the justice mechanism can help us enable to protect our data and the privacies.
There are several questions, Pradeep, but I don't think we'll be able to take all these questions. But I mean, maybe I'll take a couple of more questions. There is another gentleman by name Rohit Daya. You talked about the security in using HTTPS. He says, how do we know that they're all safe?
So HTTPS is a mechanism which encrypts the data from your browser to the server. So for example, if you're using a site and when you enter your username and password, if it's pure HTTP, anybody can access the data as it travels on the network and get to know your username and password. If it's HTTPS, it's only lying between your browser and the data center server. So when you look at your bar in which you have the entry, you normally find HTTP or HTTPS there. HTTPS, typically you get a symbol of a lock next to it to indicate that it's a secure site. There has been a lot of action today. Most of the good commercial sites are moving from HTTP to HTTPS, but yet there would be some of them. There are also tools which can help you tell you that a site is not using HTTPS. It can automatically pop up to tell you that it's not using HTTPS. So you can take a calculated risk as to do you want to still continue with it or not.
There's one audience, I mean, Ruby Ali has got several questions. I mean, I'm just picked up one. How do we know and check that the message that we have received is either fake or a malware contained email or message?
Yeah. So this again is a problem which large technology companies across the world have tried to solve because they know that it's very difficult for an individual to know that. So there's something called web reputations which have been built in. There's something called malicious links which have been built in. These large organizations have huge amount of data coming to them, telling them about malwares, about malicious links, malicious sites. They use artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to extract things which they feel are malicious and then build them into a database. So when today you go through any of these sites, for example, you have sites like your applications or even your service providers provide you a link where when you click or type a web link or a website, it goes first to the malicious database, checks whether there's anything malicious about that. If so, it gives you a warning saying that it's a malicious site. Do you still want to go ahead or not? So this is one of the mechanisms which is coming across the world, which gives a fair amount of protection. However, the next amount of protection is that we talked about social engineering. When you get links from known or unknown people, don't assume that just because it was sent by someone who is known to you, the link is safe. You can always check it through various fact checker mechanisms. There are multiple ways of doing that, but don't access a link just because someone has sent that. Be very sure as to why do you want to access the link. Is it going to add any value to you? If so, check it and do it. And in your browsers, the ones which you use regularly, your bank account or something, never use them from your email message. Go to the browser, save it as a bookmark, and use it straight away from there, because then that's the way you're sure that there's no way that link has been malformed and accessing a different site.
Pradeep, I think he's your buddy. Milind Kulkarni is asking a question. How do we identify a spam mail or a message which is contained in the attachment that you receive as an email?
Okay. The nice thing about spam mail or malwares is that the messages which they come in are typically not good enough there. They don't have the quality of a site. For example, today, if you have a spam mail coming from your State Bank of India or ICICI site, and you find that it has got spelling mistakes or poor grammar, you can be sure that you would not expect a good organization to do that. So that's one of the ways to identify the spam mail messages. Other one, if you have a doubt, don't click, send it to these sites. There they can analyze and tell you. More importantly, today, a good antivirus, anti-malware system which sits in your device or your laptops have automatic mechanisms to go to these sites, check with the central systems to see whether it's a malware or not, and try and give an advice to you. This is a mechanism to do that, but again, like I said, don't click links if you don't think it's important for you to do that.
There's another question from Mr. Manas. He says, how do we prevent data being collected by certain browsers? There's another thing that, you tend to accept whatever conditions, wherever you sign in, you just say yes, yes. And then how do we prevent these people from accessing your data?
So there are two types of permissions or data which is collected. One is by browsers and other one is by your apps on your mobile devices and tablets. The one on browsers typically are in forms what we call as cookies, and they try and do that. They're purely text data. They tend to give you what you browse, what you do with it. They're more to do with trying to monetize the data of yours and not really trying to harm you. There would be malicious links, no doubt, but more of them, they're basically trying to monetize your browsing habits and try to gain information from that. You can always block all cookies if you want to. There are mechanisms in the browser to do that, but be aware that blocking all cookies sometimes makes those applications not able to work, especially your bank accounts, etc. Your bank sites, many of them require you to mandatorily activate cookies. You can do them selectively. More important is what you give is permissions on your mobile devices, because that's where you have to be extremely careful, because many of the mobile applications do not need all the permissions they ask for. For example, if it's a video browsing or video conferencing application, why should he have access to your SMSs, which today could be used by somebody to access your OTP, which comes on SMS. So you have to be very careful. There are mechanisms, newer browsers and newer versions of operating systems give you a lot of mechanisms to control them. So an updated operating system, rather than trying to use Android version 6, if you try and use Android version 8 or 9, you'll find that it has got far more protection mechanisms built in.
There are several people who are asking, how do we know that the particular device is having malwares or the emails containing phishing material, phishing information. So many people have asked this question. Would you like to take that?
Yeah. So the basic thing I mentioned, you need a good security guard sitting on your device who looks at everything coming in and sees whether it's clear or not. A good antivirus solution which has got antivirus, anti-malware, firewall, intrusion detection, web reputation checking. You look at them, there are some very good ones today in the market, and all of them over the period of time have learned that they have to improve upon that. You use them and they more or less, if they're updated, will give you a good response to each of these activities without you putting effort on to do that. It's important that the and these antivirus solutions are updated regularly with the latest updates, because something may have been, you may have updated a week back. In the last 1 week, some vulnerability has been discovered, which because your antivirus has not been updated, he doesn't know about that, and that could be the one to come into your systems. So a good set of utilities is important for doing that.
There's one gentleman, Vinay Avdesh. What are the best ways and technology to stop malware attacks? He said there are several antivirus claim to be they're very safe antivirus and anti-malware softwares. Which one to believe and which not to believe?
It's a very difficult question to answer. There are a lot of people come, like anything else. You have today a variety of offerings to you. Some of them are premium offerings for which you pay a high amount. Some of them are decent offerings. Some of them are very low cost offerings which can do limited stuff. One of the good ways to see how good application or a system is, antivirus system is to go and do a lot of searching and browsing. Go to a number of sites which are available today who do a review of various solutions provided by different people. You have multiple sites. You read, go through multiple of them. They tell you the good thing, the bad thing, the pros, the cons, the cost versus benefits, all those things. And then also talk to a lot of people. And then once you home on to something which you say, why do I need a particular thing? For example, in my case, I have about 4 or 5 devices which I use. So one of the requirements I looked at was a solution from an antivirus provider who can help me manage 4 or 5 devices at one time. So he gave me a good package in which I can do these 4 or 5 devices. And same thing, so now I know that I installed those the agents on my 5 devices, and all of them are protected by one simple system. So there are multiple ways looking at that. But most importantly is to just do a lot of browsing, a lot of search. And today you've got excellent sites which will give you information about them.
Just before we went on air, we were actually discussing, Pradeep, that you were telling that this can be used in different languages. A couple of people who actually commented on that. This is in English. It will be very good if it's in Hindi, so that it can reach out to large people. For those audience who actually asked this question, I'm extremely happy to inform you that Pradeep has actually given us a clearance that we can use the slides. He's also going to give us the script. We will try and have all languages as far as possible, different transcripts for this, and we will try and create packages in different languages. So thank you, one of the visitors who has actually commented on this. I also have another message for you, Pradeep. Quite a lot of your school guys have logged on. There is Thakur, Sudhir, I think he's from Gulf. There is I think Anirudh Gudi, Chand, and quite a lot of them, Milind Kulkarni. So they're all saying hello to you, and thank you for giving us this wonderful lecture.
Thank you, friends. Thank you.
If there are any more questions, I know there are several questions which we were not able to answer. What we will try and do is offline, when we will try and answer each of these questions. So this will be there on our Facebook. Very soon we are going to put this on our YouTube as well. So as far as possible, we will try and answer most of your questions. Thank you so much for joining the Nehru Science Center. Like always, my request is please do like and subscribe our Nehru Science Center Facebook, and also the YouTube channel. Continue to be logged on. Please be safe, and this time too will pass, and we'll all come out victorious. Sooner than later, there will be a scientific revolution, there will be vaccines, there will be therapeutic things. We have all improved on the health infrastructure. So be rest assured that the numbers may be increasing, but we are all very safe. Thank you so much once again for joining. Thank you, Pradeep.